Hey, everybody, welcome to Baseball Recruiting Confidential. I am your host, Justin Musil. Appreciate you hopping on and joining us here. And for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Justin Musil, founder of the Parent Dugout, co-owner of the Parent Dugout with Carl Ravitch. Awesome new platform that we have launched a few months ago, and you can check that out at theparentdugout.com. And also, I'm the founder of Justin Musil Baseball. But excited to be here with Nate Cole today, good friend of mine, someone that I respect a lot, has done an incredible job in his career, and someone that I think very highly of. Has really good insight, and it brings just some different, unique experiences. Obviously, being at Harvard and a high academic school and all that. So we'll get to that. But before we do, this is a live interactive show. So if you have questions, if you want insight on anything, you can ask me directly. You can ask Nate these questions as well. You can throw them in the YouTube chat, and we will get to those as we go through the show. So we'll dive into those. We're going to talk about being at a high academic school and how you get recruited by a high academic school. A lot of high academic players out there that really focus on just the academic side of it, along with being obviously a talented baseball player, but very focused on the specific schools within the high academic realm. So we're going to talk about that today. I think it's a really important topic and something I'm super interested in talking with Nate about. But you can throw the questions in the YouTube chat as we go. Let's go ahead and bring in Nate Cole here, one of my buddies, someone that I really respect, and let's chat with him a little bit more here. What's up, Nate?
Justin, good to be with you. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you bet, man. I know that you guys are busy, and there's just more and more of these types of conversations that people are doing. So I appreciate you taking the time, man. I always know a lot going on, especially with August 1 now and 2028s, and you have a lot going on. But what's your daily life looking right now, man? Looking like right now after the 2028s kind of coming to the contact period. Where are you guys at? What is your daily routine looking like right now, buddy?
Yeah, it is a busy time of the year for sure. We're just kind of approaching the end of our, I guess, evaluation stage. We're getting close to coming off the road here. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, with August 1st in the rear view, as of a few days ago, I guess the daily life consists of we're getting really close to wrapping up our 27 class, and then certainly moving on to the 28 class and starting to build some relationships with guys there, and reaching out to a number of prospects that we've seen throughout whatever the course of this past summer, this past spring, maybe the past couple of years, whatever the case may be. So, building relationships, starting, to kind of put the wheels in motion with the 28 class, and then wrapping up this 2027 class here. So.
I love it, man. All right. So let's talk about your background a little bit just to kind of introduce you. I know you, have known you for a long time. I'd like you to share a little bit more about your background and how you ended up at Harvard. If you could just take us back to even your playing days and move us through your career to how you got to this point.
Sure. I grew up in Massachusetts, played high school baseball at King Philip High School, and then I moved on to be a left-handed pitcher at Central Connecticut State. Um, and then got right into coaching right away. Started my coaching career as a pitching coach at Southern Connecticut State University, Division II program in New Haven, Connecticut. Was there for 8 years. I had a lot of success with the Owls and at Southern Connecticut, and then I moved on to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Mass. At that time, was a Division I program in the Atlantic 10. Was there for 6 years, and then I just completed year 5 at Harvard, in obviously the Ivy League, and been a tremendous place to work, and work for a great head coach in Bill Decker. So I feel extremely fortunate to be a part of the program, and obviously you touched on some of it. It's a high academic institution with awesome kids, and that I feel extremely fortunate with to work with each and every day. So great spot, and just trying to continue to work towards bringing in the best student athletes we can and win Ivy League titles and hopefully moving these guys on to professional baseball.
Yeah, interesting, man. Good stuff. I appreciate you sharing the background. I okay, so let's talk about just the high academic guys. Obviously, that's your focus. If they're non-academic, it's fairly irrelevant to you, right? At Harvard, I mean, you can love a player all you want, but if you can't get them into school, it's irrelevant. So, for this conversation, I know we talk about a lot of different things, and we've talked about different things in the past, but just for this conversation, if you're if you're looking at a high academic high school player right now, where do you start in that process? And what is your, yeah, let's just start there. Where do you start in that process with them? What do you start looking at right away? What are some of what are the pieces of information that you're trying to gather on the players that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, we can use this 28 class, I think, as an example, right, where we're just starting that process with them. So certainly throughout the course of whether it be the summer or the spring, when I was keeping an eye on 2028s or watching 2028s, I'm identifying those that are just that high academic. So it could be knowing what their GPA is right off the bat, right? So from Harvard's perspective, maybe I'm looking north of 3.7 for every single kid. And if it's below that, usually at this juncture of time, just we can't work with that. So, the GPA is the first thing that's going to stand out. Obviously, at this point in time, most of these 2028s have not taken an ACT or SAT, so not as focused on that. So GPA is going to stand out. And then certainly now that we're having conversations with these individuals, it's immediately getting their transcript and seeing what that looks like. And through that could be, just the level of education they're receiving through the school they're at. It could be making sure that what is as important as anything is that they're challenging themselves in the classroom from an advanced placement perspective. And then obviously making sure that they're having success on that transcript as well. So those are some target points there that are going to start the conversation or at least get us interested. And then, again, some of that gets weeded out pretty fast based off, maybe some certain grades or a school or, what that individual is looking for. It really becomes no different than any other program at that point.
Yeah, I wanna touch on this because the transcript is also important, right? So you guys are looking for certain things within that transcript. So strong GPA is kind of where it starts, and then from there it gets a little more detailed. Can you just share with people? So let's just say you're talking to me and you like a player, I share a transcript with you. What are you doing with that to get a read on that? What are you doing? Where are you taking that to? Can you just kind of share the steps? I think it's super interesting because I know this, but it's super interesting for people who don't. Like, there's work that you're doing with that transcript to make sure it is someone that maybe, it's not just, GPA is where you start, but then there's a little bit, it goes a little bit deeper. Can you just share a little bit about that, what you're doing with that transcript behind the scenes?
Yeah, and again, obviously, I will speak in relation to Harvard. I know
Yeah.
some of the Ivy Leagues work in different forms or
Yep.
fashion.
Yep.
A lot of Ivies will quickly get an initial academic pre-read. Maybe in our case, I'm having constant conversations with our admissions liaison. I may shoot him a transcript if it's something that I have a question on or not sure about the area in which they are from, the
Yeah.
high school. And then, yeah, I think the big thing in that individual transcript is going to be the level of classes that they're taking, right? So usually by the end of senior year, we're looking, and again, each school offers a different amount of APs. There are some schools out there that do not offer any APs or advanced placement courses. Some individuals will then get involved in dual enrollment. But point being, we're looking for somewhere between the 4 and 8 range for APs. Now, the more APs, the easier it's going to make life for us, for that individual. And then obviously they need to have success in those APs. So challenging themselves in the classroom to make sure that they're prepared for the rigors of the academic, um, the academic rigors at Harvard is going to be extremely important. We need to know that, when they come into school, that they're ready to handle that and hit the ground running. So, um, I think, one thing I always kind of suggest to parents and to prospective student athletes, is to do just that, to challenge themselves. If something like an Ivy League is of importance or a goal of theirs, because at the end of the day, if we start recruiting, let's just say, and it usually doesn't happen this late, but if we were to start, their senior year and there's only one AP on that transcript, there's not a whole lot we can do at that point, right? They're going to end up falling short. So, um, I always suggest to try to get two or three, certainly their junior year, and then again, where maybe some other institutions, your senior year, you might be able to kind of take your foot off the gas a little bit, or take a little bit of an easier senior schedule. Certainly, that is not going to be the case if we're getting involved in the recruitment at Harvard. They're going to need to continue to work extremely hard in the classroom and keep their foot on the gas. And it could be 3-4 APs their senior year, and then oh yeah, they got to continue to crush it and have success from that realm. So
Yeah, it's really good, man. I appreciate taking them through that. I think it's also important. I'm going to just step back from the academic side because it's also important for people to know there's still a strong evaluation aspect. Like the talent evaluation doesn't go away. So you're looking for the combination, which I think is also very important because in general, I think that it can maybe get a little bit skewed that all of the high academic institutions, we'll just use I think everyone knows Stanford as a strong baseball program, but let's just move away from a Stanford. But I think there's this general sort of thought that, well, maybe I'll just go play at Harvard because I know I have the grades there. It's not that simple either, man. You guys, when we talk about Ivy programs, when we talk about even high academic Division III programs, there's a ton of competition to get into those places. And so yes, the pool is smaller, but the talent is still really, really good. Can you just talk a little bit about that and making sure we're hitting on that aspect as well? Because I think that gets lost a little bit. We're talking about academics today, and I get that, but I want to make sure people understand the talent also has to be really good. Can you just talk a little bit about that and how selective you are, and maybe talk a little bit about the talent that you're looking for there?
yeah, I mean, make no mistake about it. Like, we are looking for baseball players first, right? I mean, we want baseball players. We want guys that love baseball. We want guys that enjoy competing. So yeah, like, we've been talking about academics quite a bit, but at the end of the day, some of those things when we talked about what we initially look for, sure, it's a 3.7 and above, but then it just kind of starts and stops there. And it's my sole focus is on, the baseball player and recruiting the best student athlete we can get. So to add to that, you talked about the competition. And again, each Ivy League is a little bit different. Their number is going to be a little bit different, but you know, at Harvard, we get around 7 slots per year, and essentially that's where we're supporting a class of 7, their application, their admissions process. That is a small number, right?
Yeah.
That could include 3 or 4 arms. It can include 3 or 4 positional players. And again, it's Harvard. We recruit nationally. I am all over the country looking for the best 7. So, I think, sometimes we get emails or people reach out and, oh, I have a 4.5 and GPA and a 1500 SAT, and but I run a 7.4, and like, that's great, but that's not going to help us win baseball games. So at the end of the day, we're recruiting the best 7 that we can get that fit our exact positional needs, and we have to be selfish about that because again, we're not bringing in a class of 15, 20 guys. Aren't going to show up to campus and there's 25 arms. That's just not the case. So we need guys to come in and compete right away. We need now how much innings or at bats they get. That's ultimately up to them. But we need guys that can be ready to compete and help us win from the get-go. And obviously there's going to be a development process. We don't use the transfer portal that is at, some other Ivies may in a very small number. That is not something that we partake in at Harvard because, again, Harvard in general only gets 10 transfers per year. So usually that's not happening from Harvard's side of things. So, whether an individual hits 200 or 450, we're going to continue to stick with them and try to develop them and get the best version of themselves each and every day. So, it is competitive for sure. And again, make no mistake about it, and speaking for myself, like I want guys that want to play professional baseball. Those are guys that, at the end of the day are going to work extremely hard. They're going to chase their dreams each and every day. And a lot of times, we are recruiting guys that are in the mix, whether that's to be drafted out of high school or certainly we hope after, the end of their junior year or senior year. So we're recruiting that caliber of student athlete and, make no mistake about it. We want guys that love baseball and want to play baseball.
Yeah, and I think it gets it's kind of funny, man. I kind of chuckle about this because you're incredibly blessed to be at an institution where so many people want to be, right? I mean, that's obviously a huge advantage. The the downside sometimes can probably be that, the thought is just that, well, if you're strong enough academically, maybe you can just go to one of those places, and that's not true either. And so you're really looking at this the accurate picture of it is really good baseball players that also are really good students. And that's, sometimes that can get lost in the shuffle a little bit. I want to just pause for a second and talk about, your recruiting strategies, your style, all that stuff. Can you talk about the events and the things that you like to do, the things that you like to attend? I just want to paint the picture here for everybody on, if they're trying to get in front of you, what is that path? Obviously, you have your own camps and all that, but can you just take us through what a typical summer, fall might look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think from the summer side of things, we attack it in a couple different ways. I am all over the country. I spend a lot of time down at Lake Point and East Cobb. So I am at a lot of the national tournaments. So your NPI with PBR, your WWBA 17U, 16U, PBR Futures, PBR Senior Games, the PBR 17U National Championship, PG Elite in Hoover. I like to watch games. I like to watch tournaments. I like to see guys compete in a team setting. But we're also attacking it from some high academic camps. Our head coaches at all the show ball events that is a high academic camp that or showcase that takes place across different areas of the country. And then, yes, certainly you touched on it briefly. Like our camps are super important too, right? That provides an avenue for the whole staff to see. It provides an avenue to get them to campus and see the place and obviously interact with our staff and get to know guys. And so we try to attack it from a number of different avenues. And then certainly moving back into the spring, that's as good as it gets right there in terms of seeing guys in a high school setting and competing for with their friends and teammates and for their school. So we try to get a little bit of everything to again all that to put together the best seven. So again, there's a lot that goes into it. Just to recruit a class of seven for sure. Right. But the different avenues and different ways of going about it.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking us through that. And it's interesting because obviously it's a national brand, which does change the recruiting. In your role at UMass, for example, that's a little different brand than Harvard, right? So you just have to kind of understand your identity and what school you're at and where the most kids you're going to draw from. I do think it's more challenging at a high academic school like yours in some ways because it really is coast to coast. You're trying to draw the best talent from all over the country. And And I want to, there's a lot more that I want to talk about with this conversation, but I do want to get to some of the questions here because they're starting to flow in. And if anybody else watching has them, feel free to throw them in there. We'll get to them. But I want to go to Royce's question here. So it's a good question. If a kid is sitting in his bedroom right now watching this and he has a 3.8 GPA, can really play it, nobody has found him yet. Let's make this kid a 27. 27 or 28. I guess it can be either one. But what is the one thing he should do tomorrow to get on your radar?
Yeah, each program is probably going to be in a little different stage right now, right? So as
Yep.
I mentioned, let's just say you said if he's a 2027, we're getting really close to wrapping up this class. So we
Yep.
obviously have a very, very specific need in terms of what we're looking for.
Yeah. And
But
Nate, can I just pause you on
again,
that for a second? I just want to pause on that for a second. Anytime you hear these conversations, and I want to let you finish, but anytime you hear these conversations, you're going to speak to Harvard. You're going to speak where you guys are at. I want people to know there are many schools still looking at 27s. 27s are far from over. You guys are a unique sort of brand. Your slots are different, the things that you're looking for. So I just wanted to pause there just because I didn't want to create any more panic for any of the 2027 players and parents listening. So I want you to finish that. So let's just say it's a 27. You kind of ran us through that. You're getting kind of down to the end. You probably have your pool, but I'll let you finish that and what the difference is a 28.
yeah, in simplistic form, I'd say just reaching out via email or I get a lot of direct messages on Twitter. Um, I'll be honest, sometimes I like the messages on Twitter a little bit better. And that may be a little bit different than some coaches. Or having a coach reach out and say, hey, this individual is still uncommitted, really good player. Here's his GPA, his SAT score. And then, I'm usually going to make sure that I follow up on that, or at least do my research and in terms of watching some videos. So I always check out a kid's Twitter page. Again, I enjoy looking at their Twitter page. I think it's a free advertisement
Yeah.
or timeline of them getting better or some video clips in there. So that's again my suggestion to parents is or prospective student athletes is to make sure they're utilizing that tool. And then whether it's where they're going to be, making sure that they're informing me where they're going to be the rest of the summer, the fall, maybe, we have an August camp coming up. A lot of programs in the Ivy League or high academic schools are going to have a camp in August at some point. So, and to touch on your point, again, we still have a slot to fill. There are a number of really, really outstanding academic schools that still have, plenty of spots open. It is not too late. We have a lot of schools have admissions deadlines that they have to reach, but again, that each school may be a little bit different with their timeline. And again, most of these academic schools are going to be lighter on the transfer portal side, right? So they're going to prioritize the high school recruitment more than anything else. And again, most of these schools have to get it right. So sometimes that can take a little bit longer. It doesn't mean we're going to make rash, judgments or decisions. So sometimes it could be seeing an individual 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And most schools are, can move at different speeds. But so I would say, email, Twitter, direct messages, having a coach reach out. I think all those will work, and I'm going to make sure that I at least do my job and follow up and do my own research from that side of things.
Yeah, man, such good info there. I appreciate it. I think too, when we look at the entire landscape, there's so much coming at you guys, and I do think you hit on it, but you hear it a lot, and I always just like to be real with people because it's easy to say like, oh, just email coaches. You and I both know, man, it's easy access to your email, and there are hundreds of players doing that. And it's just, you might respond to those. I'm not saying you don't, but I'm just saying in my experience, I talk to coaches all the time who are like, I don't check emails with that stuff. I just delete them and try to get caught up in my inbox. Like, let's be real about it. And so I like what the information you gave there with the DMing. I do think that's a little bit more unique, at least, where there's probably not hundreds of people doing that. You're getting
Right.
a lot, but you're maybe trimming that down a little bit, giving yourself a chance there to get looked at. And then it is easy, right? Because it's, as soon as you click on it, you can scroll through on some of their videos and stuff if they've done kind of a good job with that, of building that out. So I appreciate the insight on that stuff. I want to go to Dom's question here. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, buddy, but like, when you look at I'll just ask the question: how important are showcases, camps, and tournaments in the recruiting process for high academic schools? What events actually move the needle? That's a pretty broad question, but I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I think all those are important. I mean, they're
Yeah.
all data collecting. From a showcase standpoint, are we ever going to make a decision off one showcase? Probably not, right? Like, but
Right.
at the end of the day, it's giving us info, it's giving us data, and then we're going to go watch that kid play in a game or two, or three or
Yep.
four.
Yep.
The camps are extremely extremely important, and the biggest thing for me with camps is just getting an opportunity to hang out with guys and interact with them and see if they're going to be a fit for the program, for the coaching staff, with future teammates, whatever the case may be. Again, I think I mentioned in earlier, I enjoy the tournaments the most because I want to see guys compete. I want to see guys, through the course of a weekend, a week, a couple tournaments, obviously a high school game setting. So through that, there could be some success, there could be some failure, but that's all part of it. But I want to, and I a lot of times it's okay. How does that guy show up the next day after, maybe struggling the previous game, or how does he respond in his next outing on the bump after struggling? Or maybe I want to see him continue to have success. And all right, this guy continues to just flat out get outs. And so I think all those are important for sure. If gun to my head, I'd probably say showcases are maybe the lowest on that list, but they're all important.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. And I do think it's like you said, it's all of them, right? It might be a combination, and sometimes it might be at a showcase you see a guy, and then you maybe go see him in game then after that. But I want to give an example of a guy you and I were just talking about. I won't use his name just for NCAA purposes and stuff, as a high school player, but there are times where you're going to come across players where you really like them, but then you try to figure out if you can make it work academically, but they're just short. And so you guys spend a little bit different time, a different amount of time sifting through that, right? So you have the talent, and then sometimes you have these tweener academic guys, even though if you're like, yes, I kind of am in on the baseball side. Now I have to figure out if the academic side works. So it's just an interesting sort of, landscape that you have to navigate when you're going through all this. So the reason I'm bringing that up, Nate, is because when you look at the events, the academic, for the academic players, the high academic players, the showcases, the camps, and the tournaments, I personally like specific showcases for high academic guys because it can narrow the path a little bit to you maybe seeing somebody. If it's a high academic, one of my favorites is like Head First. Brendan Sullivan does a great job with those, but it's like if you know that most of the kids going there are high academic, it kind of starts to narrow that path a little bit. I just think that that's important to note too, that there are certain academic camps that in showcases that may be a little bit better for a high academic player. And we don't have to get into that at length, but I wanted to bring that up because I think it's important to where, it does makes your job a little easier if there's been some vetting of the high academic side of it. Do you want to just touch on that, Nate, just real quick on just, some of those camps and showcases that are a little bit more focused on the high academic players?
Yeah, no doubt. Those are huge for us, right? Because at the end of the day, that showcase or camp is going to do some level of vetting, in order to have those guys participate in the showcase. So, if you're going to pay some of those camp fees or showcase fees, you better be a fit for a lot of those schools, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for the most part, that allows us to watch every player on the field. Where, yeah, I just talked about tournaments, and I enjoy watching the tournaments, but not every player on a tournament field is for Harvard, right? So
Yeah.
I have to make sure that I do my homework and prep going into watching a game, or I have to make sure I know who the academic guys on the field are. Um, Now, again, there's been plenty of times where a kid stands out, and then I do some homework after and realize that he's high academic, and away we go. But yeah, those high academic camps and showcases are massive because, again, we're getting a chance to watch as many players in a single setting as we can, and usually those guys are going to have interest in an Ivy League
Yeah.
school for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's the whole dynamic of those showcases are a little different just because the players at them, like you said, they're typically investing into that camp or that showcase because they are high academic and they are focused on schools like yours. So I want to go to the next question here. This is another good question from Mark, and this is just in general. I like this player. So for younger players who may not be physically developed yet, what traits make a coach believe they could become a college level player? So this is maybe more just broad landscape here of what the talent might look like. So what's your thought on that, Nate?
Yeah, certainly I'm going to look for some level of projection. So even if they're not physically developed yet, I'm going to, through years of recruiting, going to understand maybe what the projection looks like. Um, Athleticism is huge for me. So even if they're not physically developed, but they can, show a level of athleticism that we're looking for based off that particular position that they play, that's going to be huge. Sometimes it's me, learning through the process what their familiarity and history with the weight room is, and seeing if we can make some adjustments there or change anything that would project into a better physical situation. Sometimes it's learning their nutritional background, excuse me, and learning what adjustments we potentially can make when they get to campus there. And then, if they're not physically developed, again, one of the things that I'm always going to pay attention to is that they play the game hard, and if they, play it with a passion and love competing. So there are a number of things that you can do on a baseball field if whether it's they're younger or even in their junior, senior year, and they're not physically developed yet, that can still catch my eye or catch coaches' eyes. And again, some of that stuff is obvious just in terms of their attitude, their energy, and their effort. And again, obviously the position is going to dictate, what we're looking for too, right?
Right.
Maybe a corner infielder, we're going to look for a little bit more. They're going to have to be physically advanced, or
Yep.
I'm going to need to know that there's projection that they get physically advanced. So, and everyone has their items that they look for, or checklists that they look for from maybe pitchers or catchers or outfielders or whatever the case may be. But yeah, like if you're not physically advanced, I would hope that you can run a little bit, from maybe an outfield perspective, and can do some different things in terms of bat to ball, and having a hit tool, and can change the game in other ways. So it's certainly not the end all tell all. As you may imagine, as college baseball continues to get older, I do think that being physically advanced is important. I always say that your body is your billboard, so that's one of the first things I notice, when I'm watching a kid. What does their body look like?
Mhm.
It's the first thing. It's obvious, and I think I speak for all, most coaches when I say that. So, that's why getting in that weight room and doing what you can from that perspective, I think is important. But with all that said, there's projection as well, and maybe what we can do with that student athlete moving forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It's good stuff. Good stuff there. Appreciate the questions for everyone giving us questions here. Super, super helpful, and obviously great to get your insight. I will say this too on the younger players, Nate. I do think it's really important for people to understand that there is a skill that can be seen even with the underdeveloped or less physical player. And so to me, if I go watch, let's just say a 14-year-old, I can tell you if they're skilled, but it also give you the reasons that, the things that they may need to do to put themselves in position to be ready at a Division One, down the
No
road.
question.
But you and I could both go watch a 13, 14-year-old. I mean, we could go back to probably 10, 11, 12 and pick out the guys who are super skilled. Now that's young, and that's not what you're doing. It's not what I'm doing. But my point is there are players that have skills, and when you have elite skills, they really stand out. Even if you're 5'9", 150 pounds, 145 pounds as a freshman, if you're extremely skilled and you still have some growth in there, and you know that you're going to gain weight, and you work hard in the weight room, and you're disciplined in your nutrition, all of those things, if you can combine all those things, this is a message I always try to get across. Man, if you're skilled, that's where it starts. Like, so at that point, now it just becomes about building the body, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that's another important thing to remember too, is just, it's not just if you're extremely physical and athletic. Does it help? Yes, but you have to have skill. And so I always say this, Nate, and I still feel like it's hard to argue this. Pitching is a little bit different, but I'll just like say this from a broad terminology standpoint and a broad sort of statement. Becoming the best athlete that you can be really helps you everywhere on the diamond. Like, even if you're a pitcher and you become a better athlete, if you're a left fielder, clearly you have to be a pretty good athlete. First baseman that can move a little bit better. Maybe he's not an elite athlete and a 6'5" runner. He can really hit, but becoming a better athlete helps that guy, helps him move side to side. So when you talk about the young players, I always want people to know, young players, develop your athleticism, train, try to get physical, try to get your body in the right position. But do not be mistaken. If you are very skilled, there's probably, a good spot for you at some point when that body catches up. What are your thoughts on that, Nate? A little rant
Yeah,
for you today.
well, no, I mean, one thing, when we have some, whether current players or former players, maybe come talk to prospective student athletes at a camp, right? Like, so maybe they're working our camp. And I always ask them, if they were to go back to their high school years, what would they do differently? And one thing they always say is they would have prioritized the weight room, moving more athletically, getting stronger, would have been something that if they were to do differently, or they would have paid a little bit more attention to. They also mentioned sleep and recovery. So again, and that's coming from current, college, freshmen through seniors, that they would do differently. So we talk about that, that projection piece.
Yeah.
I think this may sound crazy, and I tell some guys at camp sometimes, I would almost prioritize a trainer over a pitching coach at times when you're, I don't know, again, 12, 13 is too young, but
Yep. Yep.
when you start to enter that, 14, 15, 16-year-old age, because if you can develop athleticism in the skill,
Yep.
the skill's already there a little bit, then, you're cooking with gas. So,
Yep. So true, man. Become a better athlete. You're going to be a better player. Like it, I mean, you can basically take it any position on the field. It'll help, offensively, it's going to help you. You're going to be more explosive. Like athleticism
yep.
and explosiveness is what people are looking for now anyways. But really good questions here, Nate. I appreciate the insight, buddy. I'm going to keep working through these and then I'll get back to our conversation here, but there's so many good questions here. So Ryan asks, what is the fun? I like this one. What is the funniest or most unexpected question a parent has ever asked you on a recruiting visit? You got any good ones for us there, man? Probably got to think a little bit on that one.
Uh, yeah, I think that I think what a lot of times people don't realize is that, and again, speaking to Harvard, or maybe your Harvard, Yale, Princeton's, or any of the Ivy Leagues, or NESCACs, like, again, a lot of times they're shocked, or I shouldn't say shocked, surprised at how normal our guys are. They're just,
Yeah.
again, they're
Yeah.
baseball players first, and they can be surprised by that. At the end of the day, they're no different than some other student athletes across the country. They love baseball. They get after it. They work extremely hard. They just, again, as we've talked, happen to be really good in the classroom and care about that academic piece. But I don't know if I necessarily have any funny stories. I would just say that's one surprising piece that parents often deal with when they're on visits.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it, man. Yeah. It is kind of funny. It is kind of funny, man. Just the assumption that they like, maybe have no social skills or they're not normal kids just wanting to play baseball and be really good.
Yeah,
It does make
yeah,
me laugh.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna go to Kane's cat here. Kane's cat has a couple questions. I like this one though. I recently saw you land an elite player from Tampa, Florida. What is your recruiting and selling pitch to these elite players in these talent hotbeds?
Well, it's pretty simple. The degree is going to set you up for life. It is a golden ticket. And again, we are looking for baseball players first. We want guys that want to be professionals, and we've had success developing guys to the next level. And again, we're talking there's some security in Harvard, right? I mentioned it. Whether you hit 220 or 440, we're going to continue to stick with you. We're going to continue to work with you. Um, we've had, speaking from Harvard's side of things, over the past 4 or 5 years, from a pitching class of four, we've had two guys drafted every year. So that's almost 50% of our pitching class is getting drafted. So we're moving guys on to the next level. They're playing for an Ivy League championship, and oh yeah, should none of that work out, they're going to be just fine, right? They're going to be set up for life. So,
Right.
um, I think a lot of times, and I'm fortunate at a school like Harvard. I don't have to do a ton of sales pitch. It sells itself, but there is certainly a lot of reasons, many reasons why an individual, like a talent hotbed from again, a lot of our roster, we try to be the best we can in our backyard, and by that I mean the Northeast. And then we expand out into, talent rich hotbeds such as Florida,
Yep.
Texas. We do a lot of work in Southern California. Um, and we have a number of players from our roster from Georgia. So, yeah, again, there's good athletes everywhere. There's good academic kids everywhere, and we're just trying to find the best seven for us.
Yeah, awesome stuff there, man. Kind of goes back to your, the thought in the conversation around just recruiting nationally and trying to pull guys. You guys are a national brand and a national draw, I guess, for any player that wants to have a really strong education. I'm going to get to
I
the
would
last question here. Yeah, go ahead, Nate.
No, I was just going to say this, and as I talk to a lot of 27s and 28s on the phone, a common response I get when I ask those individuals what they want out of their college experience is they want to play early. They want, and certainly now with the transfer
Good
portal
point. Yeah,
and
good point.
and everything else going on, college baseball is getting older. They're juniors and seniors that are, again, so guys that come to Harvard, they're going to have that opportunity to compete right away. The guys that play at a lot of the come to a lot of these academic schools with maybe some smaller rosters or don't use the portal or whatever the case may be, they're going to get an opportunity to compete
Yep,
and play right away.
yep,
How much? That's up to them,
yep,
but that opportunity is there, and that's not always the case at a lot of other schools. So, and I'm a big believer. You want to become a professional,
yep,
or you got to play. You got to play.
yep,
And that doesn't always mean you have to have success all the time. You're going to learn through success and failure, but you got to play. That's the
yep.
best player development tool
100%,
there
man.
is.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about that because it's almost becoming probably one of your best pitches. Is just
Yeah.
like we're not replacing in the portal, so like we need you here and we need to get you better. Like we don't have any other
Yep.
option. Like, we need to get you better. And I that's really interesting, man. I think that's a huge, obviously, draw. And you talked about it, and I've been kind of saying this for a little while now, but in the last few months, but now more than ever, I worked on the professional side with the Brewers for about 4 years, and worked in the draft, and that was a big part of my job. It has changed so much to where the talent is spread now across all levels as well. So, not let's just take away Harvard or Ivies. Getting on the field and playing a lot of baseball early impacts you, and we're seeing guys have always been getting drafted out of Division II level or something like that. It's not like that's been unheard of. Junior colleges, of
Mhm.
course, but I think we're going to see a continued shift upward with those sort of players, because they're getting on the field and they're playing and they're getting better. So I can see it being a huge draw for you guys, just to know that, hey, you got to come here and you got to be ready. But we can't just replace, which is what you're going to get at some schools. So great points there, man. I love that stuff. I'm going to get to the last one, and then we'll wrap up our conversation. It's been such good information. Really good questions here too. So I know the answer on this one, but I'll ask it to you anyway. So Kane's Cats asked another question here. Another question to Coach: does the 5-for-5 also include Harvard, or does the same rule still apply where you can only play 4 years of Ivy League baseball?
Yeah, same rule applies. You can only play 4 years of Ivy League baseball. The Ivy League schools do not support graduate students. Again, I don't know. Maybe that could be a draw too, right? You come to Harvard, you play for 4 years, um, and then there's an opportunity to maybe move on for a graduate degree somewhere,
Yep.
or
Yep.
again, that's been the case. You've seen a number of Ivy League players that maybe did some grad school in some of the Power Fours and across the country and have a ton of success because they're really good players.
Yep.
Yeah, but for sure, just 4 years.
Yeah. Great question there. All right. So to wrap up our conversation here, a lot of this has been intertwined with some of these questions. So going back to just where you guys are at, in general, where you start in the recruiting process, and how a high school player can get recruited by a high academic school. If you had to summarize this in 30 to 60 seconds on, where they can start, if you're talking to a group of high school players, which you are now, and parents and coaches and all that, what is your 30 to 60-second summary on, hey, here's where you start and here's how you finish it?
Yeah, I think starting with the academic piece again in summary, making sure that they're challenging themselves in the classroom. Because again, if we get to a point in the senior year where their transcript isn't applicable to a high academic school, it's going to be tough to recover. Um, One of my big suggestions too is especially for like this 28 class is to just get out and take the SAT, take the ACT. It doesn't mean you have to crush it the first time, but you're going to learn. You're going to get some feedback. We can super score the SAT. So it's hard for us to move forward with an individual unless we understand or have an extreme comfortability that they're going to get to a test score that we need. Again, not every high academic school is mandatory testing. Harvard is. Not all in relation to the Ivy League is not all those schools are mandatory testing, but that is certainly a suggestion that I would put in place. The next thing is again, obviously just keep getting better. Like and I would also say this too is just because you're the best third baseman in the country that has a 4.3 GPA, again, we're dealing with smaller rosters. We may not need a third baseman. That may not be what's best for us. You talk about some of these smaller rosters at some of these high academic schools. We love versatility. So we're recruiting two-way players. We're recruiting infielders that can play the outfield, outfielders that can play the infield, that can move around a little bit. That stuff is huge to us. That creates some roster versatility. And then again, just getting in the weight room, getting stronger, being physical, and continuing to try to be the best athlete you can. And those things we're going to certainly notice. High academic schools are going to notice, and just keep going in the classroom.
Ah, man, such good information, Nate. I appreciate your thoughts, buddy, and I appreciate your time. So many things here that people can take away and really utilize the information, which is the whole goal of the podcast. So I appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy, taking the time in. I respect you so much. I appreciate you as a friend, buddy, and thanks so much for coming on the podcast, bud.
Anytime. Appreciate you, Justin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it, man. And for everybody listening, be sure to check out the Parent Dugout, theparentdugout.com. Awesome stuff we have going on. You can check us out. It's myself, Carl Ravitch, and we do a lot of cool stuff in there. There's this show that's in that, but there's a lot of other things too, like Dirt from the Dugout, and another show that Carl Ravitch and I have that we have on great guests. We've had Mark DeRosa and Theo Epstein and Dustin Pedroia. We have Eric Hosmer on tonight. Just so many good things that we're doing in there. And you can ask us anything. You can ask us your questions. But if you want more information, you can email us at info@theparentdugout.com. That's info@theparentdugout.com. Thanks so much for checking us out. Appreciate you listening to the podcast, and we'll see you next time.